the scriptures that we read this morning, especially the one that Mike just read, really addresses one of the biggest issues that we have with the human condition and in this broken world. That is taking things that are meant to be sacred, taking things that are pure, taking things that have lots of good meaning, good intentions, things that help keep our minds focused on things that are above, and taking all of that, and somehow or another, it always seems to be the case anyway, that we have a way of corrupting it. Right? We have a way of spoiling it. We have a way of removing what was good intentions and turning it into something that, well, it's quite a bit different than anything it was ever intended to be. I think that's just a part of our human condition, honestly. It's always a danger no matter what it is, right? It doesn't matter what you're talking about. It can always be an issue. And on the one hand, we go to some extremes where, well, we just remove all of that. We remove all the symbolism, remove everything out of it because, then we remove the chances of us corrupting it. Well, that presents a whole another host of issues within itself. And then the other instance, it's just the way that it is, and we just deal with it. Well, I tend to try to find a middle ground and say, well, I'm not going to not do some things because of the fear that this may end up happening. No, I have to weigh the cost, right? I have to weigh the consequences of it. I got to determine whether or not it's worth the effort. But on the other hand, some things do need to be redeemed. And some things, well, maybe just need to be let go. And that is the case with tradition. That is the case with the church. That has always been the case. And sometimes holding on to certain traditions causes more harm than good, especially when you don't understand why. What's the intent? What was the meaning behind these traditions? And this is what we do because we've always done it, and it's just right to do. Well, those are problems that are across the board with no matter what the community of faith, no matter what your church building looks like, no matter what your people look like, no matter what the name on the sign, if there is even a sign is, right? I mean, that's a human issue. That is a human condition. And such is the case with many of the traditions of the church. Some that have made it throughout the centuries and others who just, have fallen by the wayside. And such can be the case with us today as well. We see a lot of this, especially when it comes to the things that we see with what we call the church calendar, things that the church practices that have been established by the church throughout the centuries. Lent is one of those things. And coupled with Lent, especially it is the case with Mardi Gras. Now, when I grew up, Mardi Gras was good. And it still is. But quite honest, growing up, I never thought Mardi Gras had any connections with God whatsoever. And it wasn't because of, what typically happens during Mardi Gras. Because where I'm from, what happens during Mardi Gras happens all the time. And so there really was nothing different. It was just more of it, more frequently. Consecutive days in a row, and then sometimes weeks. And it was really, I won't say a shock to find out that it had some religious connections, but those connections, were very vague. And ultimately, the conclusions or how things were explained was, that's just something that the Catholic Church created, and we don't do it. But we'll go to the parades and we'll do all the other things. We just, don't go that far into it. And so, because it is the case that we're not in the South, this ain't the South, we're in the West. And Mardi Gras really isn't that big of a thing here in Texas. Now, if I was down in southern Louisiana where I'm from, I would be talking about this a whole lot more in depth. But because we are where we are, there's a whole lot that we could talk about. Mardi Gras has a very extensive history. So much that we can talk about. Lots good, lots not so good. But because it really isn't something that we deal with, right? You have to really go out of your way to go to a parade here. Are there Mardi Gras parades around here? I don't even hear it, right? Like you don't even hear about them. Where I'm from, it's a holiday. I mean, you get out of school, right? That's a big deal. It's like and you only get 3 days, but 4 days. But Mardi Gras lasts for weeks. But man, you get 5-6 days straight where you do Mardi Gras. It's kind of ingrained in us. And so that leads me to having to talk about it a little bit different to you, because that's really not your experience, is it? No, it's not. And so that being said, I still want to talk about it, but we're just going to talk about maybe a few things that I think are pertinent to us, at the very least for our understanding, okay? This is going to be more informative than anything else to you. So what is Mardi Gras? We have our ideas of what Mardi Gras is, right? Even if you didn't grow up in it, you still got your ideas of what Mardi Gras is, right? That's why people from all around the world show up in New Orleans during that time thinking that everything goes. And the people who live in New Orleans go down to the outlying areas because of the crazies that come into New Orleans that don't live there, who think that you could do whatever you want. That is real. That is true, okay? Where I grew up was about 40 to 60 miles southwest of New Orleans, which people don't think that you can go any further south in New Orleans. Like, what do you think, man? New Orleans isn't even Cajun. But the towns around it, and they're not. They're Creole. It's not even a part of the Cajun coast. I mean, look it up. I'm not trying to. It's real. It's just because you're in Louisiana, you think you Cajun. No, it ain't. If you live anywhere between above I-10, you ain't Cajun. I'm sorry. You redneck. So, and there's a difference. There's a difference. Okay? That being said, all right, let's get to it here. You have your ideas of what it is, and a lot of those ideas, quite honestly, are true. Okay? It is what it is. What you see today is essentially what it is to the world, majority of it. Okay? Mardi Gras, the term, just simply is French for Fat Tuesday. That's where we need to go. Fat Tuesday. Okay? And what we see today essentially is a celebration that really lasts for weeks and culminates on Fat Tuesday. Mardi Gras really is supposed to just refer to that one day. But what we have today essentially coincides with what's known as Carnival. You guys know what that is, right, in Brazil. And if you don't, I would say Google it, but you might come up with some stuff you don't want to see, so ask somebody. We could talk about that at a different time. So it's largely viewed, especially by outsiders, as a time of debauchery, right? We associate it with all sorts of things, partying and parades and Mardi Gras beads and all that goes with that. And king cake, right? There ain't nothing wrong with king cake. And so when we look at what Mardi Gras is supposed to be, and we're going to go all the way back to the beginning, to its intent, okay? How did it come up to where it is today? Where did it start? Mardi Gras was essentially, and this is the best example I think that we have to show how something starts off as one thing, and you would never know that based on what you see today. Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday, was supposed to mark the day before Great Lent started, on Ash Wednesday. And so Mardi Gras was supposed to be a day to indulge. And we say, see, indulge whatever you want to do, right? You go, forget you got a spouse, you go do whatever you want to do, right? You go commit whatever crime you want to do. No. Just like no. It was supposed to be a feast were you indulged in the foods that you were about to give up, that is, fast from? Remember, they fasted from meats and dairies and things like that. That Tuesday was supposed to be a day where you came together as a feast to indulge in the foods that you were about to fast from. That's where it started. Was there indulging? Yes, but it was in the morals and the standards of what was supposed to be right, what was supposed to be true. Okay, that's where it started. Now, as the church was expanding, what ends up happening is various cultures and various traditions come in. If you do a research, Google for Mardi Gras, Fat Tuesday, where it came from, you're going to have all kinds of people going to talk about how it has pagan roots. And so therefore, we like, you see, there isn't anything that we do that doesn't have pagan roots. Okay, you celebrate your birthday, guess what? It has pagan roots. That's where it came from. Okay, there isn't much of anything that we do that doesn't have some pagan roots. But it doesn't mean that those things cannot be redeemed, or it doesn't mean that just because it has pagan roots that we stop or we don't do what we do. Okay? So when you do your research and you try to figure out where this stuff came from, extensive histories, lots of background, lots of culture begins to overflow into what this day was and what the intent was behind it gradually, is lost. Okay? And as a result, what you see today, especially in the United States, see, people think like Mardi Gras. You think that it started in New Orleans. Well, it didn't. It actually started in what we know as Mobile, Alabama, before it was Mobile, Alabama. And then it kind of crept its way along the coast and became what it is today in New Orleans. But there's lots of stuff that was connected with Mardi Gras that is not good. Lots of racism, lots of bigotry, lots of sexism, lots of you name it, it is there, and it's among it. Various crews and groups and clubs began to develop that basically harbored a lot of the things that, today we would wish that were gone, but they still survive. In fact, up till recently, I would just say a couple of years ago, some of the crews, you know what a crew is, right? It's like a club. You have various clubs, a crew of Adonis, the crew of this, the crew of Saturn, you hear the pagan? You hear that, right? It was basically just groups and clubs, social clubs, and they would put on balls and parades. Lots of them would try to raise money for various causes and various things. There might have been some good stuff mixed into it, but essentially it was just a party. Which party you invited to? I mean, that's essentially what it was. Social clubs. And until recently, a lot of those social clubs, or some of those social clubs, still would not allow you into the club if you were a certain race or a certain gender. There were lots of things, and they passed laws that said you couldn't discriminate anymore fairly recently with this, and some of those clubs folded in. Instead of opening up their doors, they said, well, we will not exist if we have to allow certain things in. So that kind of tells you a lot of the things that crept into all of this, okay? So what you see today was essentially this. Let's just say that we were going to do the Daniel fast, the church, as we did a couple of years ago. And we decided, okay, before we start as a church, what we're going to do is we're going to have a fellowship meal, right? And we're going to feast. We're going to eat. We're going to enjoy the things that we're about to give up, understanding why we're going to do these things. Is that a good thing? Yes. That's where it starts. But as it evolves over time, it becomes very corrupt. It becomes just another, you can see how Satan took that and ran with it. And so, no matter what, okay, the original intent of Fat Tuesday was to indulge in foods which were you were going to fast from. And it was done within the context of morality and reason. And largely what we have in the U.S., it just seems to be a result of something good being corrupted. And while it may have started with good intentions, it was definitely spoiled. Where I'm from, in my opinion, and this is all I'm going to say about this because this is not something you necessarily deal with, it has been stripped of anything sacred or of any significance. That's the reality, okay? In fact, it does more harm than good because this is what we see where I'm from. I grew up in St. Mary Parish, so it's Catholic, Everything's Catholic there. I have family that's Catholic. I have lots of people who are Catholic. I have lots of friends that were Catholic. I grew up a couple blocks away from the cathedral. It's small. It's just a bayou town. But, hearing the bells ring and walking on I swear, I just love walking to school because that part of the sidewalk was like marble. And your shoes sounded different on it. And all of a sudden it sounded important because your shoes clicked, right? Like the whole parking lot was that. It was like, oh, it was so cool. So I grew up there, and essentially what you see is this. Mardi Gras is debauchery. And then all of a sudden you have Ash Wednesday, and all these people that you saw out there doing all these things got this cross on their forehead. And so now they become religious. And so for the most part, if you're non-Catholic and you look at the Catholics where I'm from, and this is really why they think the way that they think about Catholics, and there's a lot of animosity. A lot of condemnation because of that. Oh, so now you're going to go and be holy. You think you can? That's what the church is like. So in other words, that's what the church represents. You can go do whatever you want, and then all of a sudden now on this day you're okay. Everything is good because you got a cross on your forehead. That's how people see it. Okay, and that's how many Catholics where I am from. That's what they demonstrate. But just as well as I do, that just because that's what people do does not mean that they represent what's really behind it. I tell you, I've done some things in my life as a Christian that I would not want people thinking that's what the church represents. We've all probably done things, okay? All done it. So, but as a result of what we see, there is this like, really? How can I take this seriously when this is how you are? And be honest, there are people who think that they can do that. They can go out and they can do whatever they want, and then they can just show up on Ash Wednesday and everything's okay. That is a reality. There are some who actually believe that, okay? But that's not necessarily the case with others, all right? But it's because of that we have this view, especially where I'm from, of Lent, especially when, Mardi Gras, then you have Ash Wednesday. And so let's talk about this Ash Wednesday stuff. Also known as the Day of Ashes. And this day is supposed to mark the first day of Lent, okay? And we have to try and look beyond, okay, what we think. And because for people who are or consider themselves faithful Christians, they're not indulging in all of these other. There are plenty of Catholics, and it's not just Catholics. You have other churches that celebrate and witness to Lent and Ash Wednesday. They're not out there doing that. I know people who are not out there acting like they can do whatever they want. Okay, that is the case. That is the reality. And so it's to that I want to speak to. We have to look beyond what we think we know and what we think we see. That keeps us from being able to see, well, what's really at the core of this. So Ash Wednesday is a concept said to have originated between 590 and 604 with Pope Gregory the Great. Yeah, he was a bishop at Rome. And don't cut me off just because I said Pope Gregory the Great. He's the bishop of Rome. It was during that time, and this is where it got started. And so why ashes? Like, how did that, what's the deal? Okay. Essentially, this is what's happened. Then I'll tell you a little bit about the ashes. So there was this time where people began to come to Mass for the start of Lent. And Lent began to be marked as to start on this specific day. Because they had to figure out how they were going to count 40 days. And, you got to have some breaks in between there. And, that was the thought. Some people celebrate Lent, and everything's good on Sundays. You don't have to fast, but you fast every other day. Some of them, the way that it's funny, really, the way you see how some kind of set up. Why can't 40 days just be 40 days, Last year, my wife fasted from caffeine. And if I'd have known this, she could have had caffeine at least once a week. That would have been a break for all of us. Seriously. But it's because of the way that they time and they count these days that determines things. And eventually what ends up happening is they end up counting in order to make it an actual true 40 days. I don't understand it, but just relating the information to you. They began to start on this Wednesday, and it began to be referred to as Ash Wednesday because this pope, he was a bishop of Rome, people came in, and he began to take ashes and put them across people's foreheads. Okay, and it marked the beginning of this time of Lent. And ashes were meant to mark that you were a person who was going to be observing penance, acknowledging that you are a sinner, and trying to face and address what it is that you have difficulties with, okay? So the use of an ash or ashes as a sign of mourning and penance, we can see that throughout Scripture, and so that's kind of where the roots come from. I'm told that the use of ashes was really more in the beginning and more of a matter of a private devotion. So if you were mourning or if you were, that's something that you did. You didn't go to a church and have somebody throw some ashes on you. You did it yourself, okay? I think it's more of a cultural thing than anything else. And so later it becomes a part of a tradition to mark those, listen to this, who had fallen out of faith, out of faithfulness, fallen back, right, who'd fallen away and were coming back to the church. And when they came back to the church, what they started to do is marking them with ashes, because what it did was symbolize a person who was a sinner who was trying to come back into the fold. And what it did is that everybody else who saw those ashes on your head were able it was supposed to inspire them to have sympathy for you and to pray for you, because you were acknowledging the fact that you were a sinner coming back. No different from our invitations we used to do in days past, right? Where we sit there or stand there for 6 minutes waiting for the invitation to be done, trying to coax people to come forward so we can all think about, what really happened, right? And all waiting to see the juicy bits, and all they say is, I have sinned. Like, what does that tell me? Don't tell me anything. It's the same. It's no different. Okay, it's no different. And so it evolves into this thing where you wearing ashes represented your time of penance, that you were coming back to the church, you were coming back to faith, that you were wanting to live right. And and these ashes were meant to motivate others to pray for you, pray for you as a returning sinner, to feel sympathy for you. And eventually it began to mark the start of Lent by putting ashes on the forehead and the sign of the cross. And the ashes, this is interesting, traditionally the ashes come from the palms that were used the previous year during Palm Sunday. And so at this point, okay, Palm Sunday is a thing. And as the ashes are put on your head, the priest would say, ashes to ashes and dust to dust, or you are dust and to dust you will return. Some would add, so therefore repent and believe the gospel. And they mark the beginning of a season where you're trying to be intentional, okay, about dying to yourself. Now, I say that, and I'm not telling you that they all understood that. All right? I'm not telling you that they do. I could speak to many Catholics, many high church, because it's not just Catholic, who do certain things, but they really don't understand the intent behind it. Okay? That is a reality. That I'm not denying that, okay? But the intent was to go through this process to intentionally mark your time of inwardly looking at your life and being intentional about dying to yourself. And all this was supposed to be done in light of Jesus, the fact that we're coming up on Easter, right? The death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. And during this time, it was supposed to be marked by fasting and prayer, okay? And those are two things that we're going to talk about next week. And there really isn't a whole lot more I can tell you and say about this that I think would be beneficial to us during our time here, quite honestly. It is a Roman tradition that was adopted by other groups as well. I don't look down upon people who do that. It's not a part of my tradition. It's really not even a part of my culture, okay? It is something that people have done, and it is something that people will continue to do today. That being said, we see things like this, and we oftentimes have certain responses. We say things like what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6. We say, see, well, look, Jesus said this. When you're fasting, wash your faces. Go in your closets and pray. And look, they got ashes on their foreheads. Foreheads. Sounded like forehead. Anyway, I catch myself every now and then. So Jesus said to wash your face when you're fasting, and don't let people know you are doing these things. Go pray in your closet. And yes, in Matthew 6, Jesus did say those things. But actually, Jesus is addressing their intentions, which is why he said, don't do what the hypocrites do. He says, don't do what the hypocrites do. Why? Because they are doing things in order to be praised by others as being or seen as some super holy person. And what they were doing was praying on street corners. Now, do you need to pray in your closet? Well, if you're praying on street corners and you're doing it so you can be seen by people, then maybe you need to. If you're fasting and he says, and they were disfiguring their faces so it would look like they had been fasting for weeks or months or an extended period of time, and they were in the lowest valleys, and man, they were really digging in and really getting it. And the reality was they just woke up that morning and did some stuff to make themselves look that way. Why? So they could be seen as being holy. Their intentions were for you to deceive you, so you would think that they were being holy. Then you need to go wash your face. Jesus says, don't do that. That's the context that we must understand. So if that is your intentions, Jesus says, this is what you need to do. Okay? This is what you need to do. Don't pray in street corners. Go in your closets. Now, let's think about this. We have to be consistent, right? Because we say things like, wash your face, don't fast, don't let people know you're doing this, right? Go pray in your closets. Well, what did we do this morning? Jesus said, go pray in your closet. There aren't enough closets in this building for everybody, I'm sorry. You see, we have to take things in context. We have to look at what's being said there, and not just pull something out and try to apply it to everything that we don't like or things that we're uncomfortable with. If that's the case, then we should have no public prayer at all. Does that make sense? It's all about the intention. It's all about the intention, right? All about the intention. Sometimes if you're fasting, it is pretty obvious that you're fasting. Sometimes somebody might ask you to come out to eat with them, and they take you to, steak and potato place, and that's the thing you fasted from, and you're like, salad? Then you have to tell them, oh, but Jesus says, don't let the people know that. What's the intent? We have to look at the intent, okay? And then we say, well, he says that your fasting may not be seen by others. Exactly. It's the intent. Don't do it just to be seen by others. And maybe there are people who get ashes on their foreheads to be seen by others. That's very possible. That is very possible, okay? And you might say, well, they need to wash their faces then so nobody else will see it. Well, and they can do that. It's not required to carry it around on your head all day. Did you realize that? Like they're not required. They could literally wash their faces. What I'm being told, they can wash their faces following the service, the mass that they went to get the ashes. They can wash their faces. And you can see they should wash their faces. Then if they have it still on their faces, then they want it to be seen by other people. It's like, not necessarily the case. Some people, they'll keep the ashes on their forehead for own personal reasons. Maybe it's just to remind them. Okay? My point is this. Don't be so quick to judge and come to your own conclusions based on just what you see. Don't always judge a book by its cover. People do these things, and it doesn't mean that they're looking to be praised by others. This isn't something that we do, and that's okay. This is something that other people do, and that's okay. And we need to be okay with that as well. And this is why I see it as an opportunity. Everyone has to make their own decisions about what customs and traditions and practices that they're going to commit to and how they're going to do them. I present what I present so that at the very least, if you happen to see someone with ashes on their foreheads, you might have an idea, a better understanding of what that's there for, and it's an easy conversation starter. with other people. Don't be like Jerome. He's not here, so I'll tell you what he told me. And it's kind of funny, but he was being very serious about this. This is one of your shepherds. He says, let me tell you what happened to me on Ash Wednesday. He says, I'll go to my barber. Drew has his hair washed by his barber. Dude. He says he walks in and he's sweeping the floor. And he sits down in the chair and, he's not thinking anything. He knows the guy's been knowing him for years. And he knows he's Catholic. He knows. They've had good conversations. And so he sits there and guy's washing his hair and Drew looks up and he's like, you got something on your head. Completely innocent. And the guy says, well, it's Ash Wednesday. And immediately Jerome thought, I never connected the two. The fact that he's Catholic, and I know he's Catholic, and that he would have ashes on his forehead because of Ash Wednesday. He says, I would never, ever try and call him out or make him embarrassed because of that. It's like, I wouldn't, he says, and this is why it's so important for us to understand these things, to know these things, what we're seeing. He says, because I saw him sweeping the floor. I thought he got some dust or something on his head. It was completely innocent, right? It was completely innocent. And so he said, that's why this is so important for us to understand that. And the way that I see it is, when I see someone with ashes on their forehead, immediately, I don't look down upon them. I don't judge them. I don't think, oh, what hypocrites. I wonder what you indulged in the day before. My first thought is, number one, of respect. Like, wow, the fact that you're willing to go do that, like you're willing to express yourself in this way, that's my approach, okay? And so here's some conclusions here, okay, and we'll wrap this up. Personally, let's talk about Mardi Gras real fast. There are so many things connected with Mardi Gras today, and these will not even affect you in any way. They are just hard to look past. Redeemable as a whole, maybe. As a church, if we wanted to embark on a fast, like we talked about, or some activity that we were going to do collectively, maybe we were all going to give up watching movies or Netflix or whatever, right? Some of you are like, yeah, I ain't doing that. You out your mind. You're more willing to give up food than you're willing to give up Netflix, social media, whatever it is, right? If we decide, okay, the day before we do this, we're all going to meet together and we're going to indulge in that thing, whether it's watch a movie, everybody starts tweeting or doing whatever else, like whatever it is that you want to do, like that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. I think it's a great time to come together and spend time because you're doing it together, you're on a journey. That's fine. That's fine, okay? When it comes to Ash Wednesday, well, it was established as a Western Roman tradition. Here. Hey, Chad, before you walk out, you want to listen to this. You ought to hear how this guy talks to me, man. You're like, why haven't you punched him in the throat yet? Because I'm a Christian, that's why. So listen to this. You'll like this. You'll like this. He's going to be, I can't believe you did that. So it's a Roman Catholic tradition that was picked up by several different traditions, okay? But check this out. So you have Ash Wednesday that marks the beginning of Lent. The Eastern Church, the Orthodox Church, they also have a great Lent, but they don't have an Ash Wednesday. And the Sunday before, see how the Romans or the Western churches, we have Fat Tuesday the day before. The Eastern churches have Forgiveness Sunday the day before Lent starts. I want you to notice the differences here. Fat Tuesday, Forgiveness Sunday, where they focus on the fact that they need to be asking, they need to be forgiving people because people wrong, focusing on the concept of forgiveness. And then in the West, they start Lent with Ash Wednesday. And the East, they start Lent with Clean Monday. Yeah, that's what they call it, Clean Monday. I think there might be a little bit of schism issues still going on there, right? And then sometimes the whole week they refer to it as the Clean Week. Okay? Ash Wednesday, you can go now. Ash Wednesday, it's a Roman tradition. Okay? And that's how it got started. That's essentially what it is. I don't first think, whenever I see someone with ashes, what a hypocrite. I respect their commitment. I see it as an opportunity to have a conversation. At the very least, I know they believe in Jesus. And in a day and time that frowns, and a culture that frowns upon those things, there might come a time, even in our life, where we're no different from other places where we're happy just to see you and just to know that somebody actually believes. Okay? And so at the very least, I know they're believers in Jesus. And my takeaway is this. Here it is, okay? We have traditions that can be corrupted as well. We do things that people don't understand as well. And just like we don't want people jumping to conclusions about us, we shouldn't jump to conclusions about other people. Just remember, while traditions can become corrupt, what makes them corrupt? We do. We do. We make them legalistic. We make them liberal, which are all governmental terms, by the way, which the church seems more empirical today than it ever has been. We make them corrupt. We spoil them. We do the damage, okay? Traditions are meant to be a means to an end. They're meant to help, to remind, to engage us, to keep our minds set on things that are above. And as long as we keep that as the core intention of these traditions, then they can still be good. But let us remember they can easily become corrupted and lose their purpose and lose their meaning. We're no different. Let's pray. Now, Father, we thank you for yet another day to breathe the breath of life, to enjoy being in your presence. Help us to always be mindful of those around us and those who are not like us. And the opportunities that we have to learn, to grow, to be challenged, to challenge others. But give us the wisdom and the insight to do all of this in love, true love, with a true desire to grow closer to you, with a true desire to learn, to have our eyes opened, to converse, to challenge and be challenged, to show how we care. And that living this Christian life means something to us. And as we engage in our own practices and the things that we do, everything from prayer to fasting to silence to abstaining to generosity, whatever it is, may we always keep in mind the true intentions of these practices so that our hearts will be affected in the most positive way by the things that we do. So it's in Jesus that I pray. Amen. So as I mentioned, next week I'm going to dive into fasting and prayer and the reality of what that is. And I'm not saying that everyone has to fast from food. Some people don't need to be fasting from food for lots of different reasons. And so we're going to dive a little bit into this. What is it, and why is it a helpful practice for us? And when we say fasting, it doesn't always have to deal with food. Okay, and the week after that, we're going to start addressing Holy Week, what that is, what's known as Holy Week, and so forth and so on. And then we'll have Easter Sunday. I hope you guys have benefited from this. I know this has been more informative, but at the same time, there are a lot of things that we can take away from this. If you want to talk more about this, we can talk. If you disagree, give me 2 days, and then we can talk, okay? Let it soak in for a little while, and then we can talk about some stuff. If you need prayer, if you need whatever, if you have any needs that we can help you with, let me know. Please come up here. I'll be up here and a few others as well. And so I hope you guys have an amazing week of worship. You're dismissed.